"Come on, she's just the cleaner. Let her have a turn. We could use some amusement anyway." The line slid out of Ethan Cole's mouth like a lazy backhand, but it sliced through the plush lounge all the same. Laughter rippled across the executive suite on the 50th floor of Novodyne Holdings' Chicago headquarters tonight. Loud, bright, and careless. Crystal glasses chimed together. Someone from People Ops let out a high laugh. A vice president arched a manicured brow, entertained. In the middle of it all, beside a marble column and a battered cleaning cart, stood Lena Brooks. Dark uniform, faded badge, gloves tucked in her pocket. Steady brown eyes, posture unshaken. Nobody there knew she'd once been called the Rook Whisperer on national scholastic circuits. Back when she was 15, a skinny kid from Chicago's South Side, she'd lived on late-night blitz streams and library books until the day her father fell from scaffolding and her mother's kidneys failed. The scholarship calls stopped, and the chessboard went back into its cardboard box. Now she scrubbed offices while executives preached about disruption and vision, letting her gifts gather dust in the janitor's closet. "Step right up," Ethan gestured toward the lacquered board at the center of the lounge. "We've got an open seat for tonight's surprise guest." Lena didn't answer him. She pushed the cart aside and walked forward with measured, unhurried steps. When she stopped at the table, her calm study of the position made two directors adjust in their leather chairs, suddenly less amused. "She knows how the pieces move, right?" someone whispered, not quite under their breath. Another voice chimed in with a snicker. "It's not checkers, darling." Lena pulled out the chair and sat. "I'll take black," she said evenly. Ethan blinked. "Black, huh? Feeling fearless tonight?" She ignored the bait, calmly resetting the pieces with hands that moved from long-buried habit rather than hesitation or showmanship. The game began. Ethan opened with comfortable swagger, sliding into sharp theoretical lines he'd leaned on in Ivy League tournaments and charity galas. Lena answered each advance like rain wearing down concrete. Quiet, patient, inevitable. 5 moves in, a crease formed between his brows. 10 moves in, conversations around them thinned into whispers. By move 13, he hesitated. By move 19, his king had nowhere left to run. "Checkmate," she said softly, almost apologetic. She rose, smoothing her uniform. "Thank you for the game, Mr. Cole. I should get back to work." She guided her cart toward the elevator as if nothing remarkable had occurred. Yet, when the doors slid shut behind her, something weighty remained in the air, denser than applause, sharper than mockery. A reluctant, dawning respect. None of them wanted to name. If that moment caught at your chest even a little, tap the heart. Someone's future might depend on being seen. Drop a comment with where you're watching from. You never know who nearby needs this reminder. Ethan stared down at the board. The room had forgotten how to breathe. Ventilation hummed. For once, he wasn't sure if he'd been the player or the piece in her hands. Ethan barely remembered the rest of that evening. He stayed rooted in his chair long after Lena left, while the shallow laughter around him frayed into awkward silence, and the board members pretended not to notice their CEO had been dismantled by night staff. When the last bottle was cleared away, a junior assistant hovered. "Should I pack up the board, sir?" Ethan stood and walked out without replying. He didn't really sleep. His downtown penthouse, usually a study in curated minimalism and perfect lines, felt distorted, almost claustrophobic. He sat at the kitchen island past midnight. City lights glittering against floor-to-ceiling glass, laptop open, fingers moving faster than his thoughts. He searched her name. Lena Brooks. Dozens of hits, none of them her. No LinkedIn, no socials, no clean match in any search, no old tournament write-ups, no archived rating profiles. Just other Lenas living other lives. Not the woman who had taken his repertoire apart like she'd mapped his pulse. By 3 a.m, he was buried in the U.S. Chess Federation's dusty digital archives, sifting through years of junior events in Illinois. Nothing. No finalist lists, no bracket photos, no tidy database line with her name. It was as if she'd never existed in the official world of chess. That couldn't be right. Control like that didn't come from half-remembered park games. Finally, he zoomed in on a grainy photo from a 2011 local event, Southside Youth Invitational. One face in the background snagged his attention. Same still gaze, same braid tucked behind one ear. The caption read, "Only LJ, under 18 section." He exhaled hard, snapped the laptop closed, and pressed his palms over his eyes. What was he even doing? This wasn't about revenge, not really. It wasn't the usual bruised ego either. It felt like being quietly unstitched. He hadn't just lost a game. He'd been seen by someone the building trained itself not to see. At dawn, he canceled investor calls and drove straight to Novodyne headquarters. He showed up in the same black shirt he'd worn the night before. His executive assistant eyed him. "You okay, sir?" "Fine," he said too quickly. "Light schedule today." Then, breaking a decade-long habit, he took the service elevator down. The air smelled like bleach and aging paint. Janitors paused mid-stride. Maintenance crews stared as he scanned clipboards until he found her name. Marked off duty for 2 days. Back upstairs, Ethan paced his office, monitor glowing with spreadsheets he ignored. The internal directory gave him nothing but her badge number and shift hours. No phone, no address, no emergency contact. He considered looping in HR, then pictured policies, complaints, and headlines. He waited instead. On the 3rd night, he lingered in the executive lounge. Architectural drafts spread out, chessboard reset, white pieces quietly facing his side. At 11:43 p.m., he heard the familiar squeak of a cart. Lena rolled it in, unbothered, when she saw him. Their eyes met with that same unruffled stillness, like a lake untouched by wind. "I didn't mean to embarrass you," he started, voice lower than planned. "You didn't," she replied, pulling on gloves. "You asked for a game. I played one." "You're good," he said. "Used to be." "Where'd you learn?" he asked after a beat. Lena moved to a counter, spraying cleaner in small patient circles. "My dad taught me," she said. "He worked steel, played in the park after shift with guys who smelled like metal and cigarettes. I watched until they let me sit." "And tournaments," he pressed. "I quit before high school." "Why?" he asked, almost gently. "Because hospitals don't run on dreams, and little sisters don't feed themselves," she replied, finally looking up. The words were simple, but they landed like a closing door. Ethan's mouth opened, then shut again. What was he supposed to offer? Condolences, a promotion, a check? She turned back to her cart, rearranging supplies with the efficiency of someone who had long ago stopped expecting rescue. "Play again," he said quietly. "Not as a spectacle, just for me." She hesitated. "No crowd, no jokes, no cameras," he added. "Just us." Silence stretched like a held breath. Then she walked back to the table, pulled Black toward her and sat. "If you open with that smug king's gambit again, I'm flipping the board," she murmured. Ethan actually laughed and took his seat. They played. This time, she didn't go straight for his throat. She let positions simmer, steering him into complications he didn't see coming. 34 moves later, they reached a balanced ending neither could crack. "I should mop before the wax dries wrong," she said, rising. "You're the most disciplined player I've faced," he admitted. "Discipline's easy when everything else in your life is chaos," she answered. As she pushed the cart toward the door, he called after her. "Lena." She paused, glancing back over her shoulder. "I'd like to play again," he said. She studied him for a heartbeat, then nodded once. "Then leave the board set." And just like that, she disappeared down the hallway. This time, Ethan wasn't left stung. He was left strangely humbled and far more curious. Ethan didn't mention Lena to anyone. Not the board, not his assistant, not even the therapist he met twice a month, mostly to prove he was working on himself. He didn't need to explain it aloud to feel the shift. For a man who'd built an empire on metrics, market share, and polished statements, that unquantifiable change rattled him more than any downturn ever had. Every night for the next 2 weeks, he stayed late in the lounge. Not every shift brought a game. Some nights, Lena cleaned in silence while he pretended to review design specs or nursed a drink. She didn't linger near him, but she didn't avoid the room either. A fragile routine formed, a shared quiet between corner office power and near-invisible labor, held together by nothing but proximity. When they did set up the pieces, something wordless crackled between them. Not romance, not office gossip fodder, something sharper, like two minds tracing each other's outlines through tactics and sacrifice. Her style wasn't flashy but ruthless when it counted, merciful when it didn't. One match, with the room smelling faintly of floor wax, Ethan finally asked the question that had been nagging him. "Why are you still here?" "You mean this job?" she said, pausing with a night between her fingers. "Yeah," he replied. "This." She set the piece down carefully. "Because it pays rent. Because steady beats risky when you've already lost too much." "You could be somewhere else. Teaching, competing, anything," he insisted. She met his gaze. "Not everyone gets second chances hand-delivered in crystal tumblers and mahogany boardrooms, Mr. Cole." He didn't argue. There was nothing he could say that wouldn't sound hollow. Later that night, when the lounge was empty again and the board reset, Ethan sat staring at the chair she'd just vacated. Some part of him wanted to help, truly, not from guilt or image management, but from respect, maybe even obligation. But he knew she'd never accept anything she hadn't earned herself. 3 days later, he did something his calendar had never seen. He left at 4:30 p.m., drove himself, no driver, no calls, to Chicago's South Side. The neighborhood was the same one Novodyne once promised to revitalize with a gleaming community hub, then quietly forgot. Pavement buckled in waves. Streetlights flickered out too early. The old rec center near 53rd looked like paint and funding had both run out years ago. The moment Ethan pushed through the cracked glass doors, he heard it. The soft clatter of plastic pieces sliding across scarred boards. He followed the sound to a corner where Lena crouched beside a wobbly table, explaining how to guard a backward pawn to a boy missing his front teeth. He watched from a crooked support beam as she turned complex ideas into stories the kids devoured like candy. She hadn't noticed him yet. For a few precious minutes, Ethan just stood there, leaning against the beam, watching her move in the one space that seemed built for her. Not to survive or impress, just to teach. When the kids finally packed up their sets, a few spotted the man in the expensive coat and whispered, "You followed me?" Lena asked, rising slowly. "I asked around," he admitted. "They said you volunteer here every Saturday," he added. You stalk all your opponents like this, she asked, one corner of her mouth twitching. Only the ones who make me rethink everything I know about strategy, he said. She didn't laugh. Why are you really here, Ethan? Lena asked, crossing her arms, rec center noise fading as the kids spilled out into the parking lot. Because you deserve a real stage, and this place, while good, can't be where it ends, he said. Don't, she cut in quietly. Don't show up with donations and easy fixes dressed up as charity. I don't need your last name on a plaque. He held her gaze. Then, let's talk about something without my name on it. He unfolded a flyer from his coat and handed it over. It was for the upcoming Chicago Open, dates and prize funds printed in bold. I'm not competing, she said immediately. I'm 33. I clean offices at night. I haven't trained in over a decade. You train every time you sit across from me, he replied. Me? She shook her head. That's not the same, Ethan. Casual boards and real tournaments live in different universes. What if I told you I already registered us both? He asked. Not under Novodyne, just initials. No one will know. She stared. You registered me without asking? I did. I don't need a sponsor, she snapped. I'm not your sponsor, I'm your student. If you say no, I withdraw too. Don't tell me you're not even curious. She folded the flyer slowly, thinking. I'll think about it, she said at last. But only if we train the same way. No private coaches, no fancy setups. I play where you play, equal ground. And if I win, you stop treating me like some equation you're trying to solve, he nodded. And if I win? Lena slipped the flyer into her jacket. Then you'll understand why winning isn't always enough. That night, back at the office, Ethan had the fragile glass and ivory set removed from the lounge and replaced with a scratched wooden travel board he'd overnighted from the same supplier community centers used. When Lena rolled her cart in just before midnight, she stopped short. No more showroom set? She asked. Figured I should play on your terms, he said. She sat without comment and opened with black. Somewhere between the first pawn move and their third quiet draw, Ethan realized something fundamental had shifted. The games weren't about proving dominance anymore. They were a back-and-forth conversation. Each sacrifice and trap a sentence. And Lena, she wasn't a mystery to decode. She was a mirror, reflecting the parts of him success had dulled. For once, he was willing to actually look. The rumors were inevitable. First came the passing comments at the espresso machine. He's been staying late a lot, someone from marketing murmured. I heard he's mentoring some staffer after hours, another added. Eventually, the story found its villain, the night cleaner. Within days, Lena felt it. Conversations cut off when she walked into a room. Elevator rides went stiff and silent. Judgment, dressed as curiosity, tracked her steps. She tried to shrug it off. She'd survived worse. Empty fridges, hospital waiting rooms, foreclosure notices. But this was different. This was judgment sharpened by class, race, and old money, wrapped neatly in HR smiles. One night, after another training game ended in a tense draw, she packed her things fast. You're in a rush, Ethan said, sliding his king away. I've got other floors to mop, she answered. You're upset, he said. No, she lied, slinging her bag over her shoulder. Lena, he pushed. I don't need a babysitter, Mr. Cole, she snapped, finally meeting his eyes. Whatever this is between us, it's turning into ammunition for people who already wish I wasn't here. His jaw tightened. Do you want me to stop coming up here? He asked. That's not the point, she replied. Then what is? He pressed. She hesitated. fingers flexing at her sides. "You're used to being misunderstood and still winning," she said. "I don't get that luxury. I play one game outside the rules and suddenly I'm hustling for favors or sleeping my way upstairs." He stared, then finally nodded. Understood. The next morning, Lena found a folded note tucked beneath the travel board in the empty lounge. "I'll stay out of sight for a while," it read in his neat handwriting. "But I'm still playing. One move a night. If you're still in, answer on the board." He kept his word. For 4 nights she arrived to find a single move made and a sticky note with his notation. She replied without writing back, leaving only precise counters behind. It was strange, almost tender in its own way. A conversation with no voices, no audience, just the scraped wooden board and the understanding that they were both still committed. Outside that quiet ritual, pressure climbed. Whispers sharpened into accusations. Eventually, an email summoned Lena to Human Resources. The conference room was bone white and airless, the kind of space where people learned they'd been restructured. "We just want to make sure everything is professional," the woman in the beige blazer said, smile too steady. "There have been questions." "I clean floors," Lena replied calmly. "And sometimes I play chess with the CEO, after hours, on his break. No money, no contracts, no promises." The HR rep's smile thinned. "You must understand how this could appear to others in the company." "I understand appearance is a luxury reserved for people whose names are on the directory," Lena said, standing. "Mine usually just shows up on the schedule. Am I being written up?" "No," the woman blurted, flustered. "Then I've got work to get back to," Lena said, already heading for the door. She didn't wait for a dismissal. The fluorescent hallway outside felt somehow harsher than before. That night she almost skipped the executive floor, tempted to trade shifts, but habit, or maybe stubbornness, pulled her back. When she stepped into the lounge, the board was already mid-game. A wild queen sacrifice blazed in the center. She couldn't help a brief smile. So he was paying attention. She played the right defense and left a note. "Nice try. Your diagonal was cracked 3 moves ago." The next day, Ethan convened a closed-door meeting with his board. They arrived expecting restructuring plans and growth forecasts. Instead, he slid a single page across the table. Community Initiatives Directive, Southside STEM, and Chess Pilot. One director lifted a brow. "You want to divert funds to after-school chess and mentorship?" Ethan's tone was flat. "We promised this neighborhood something. It's time we deliver something real." "And the optics?" another board member asked. "Given the rumors?" Ethan met their eyes. "The optics are simple," he said. "We become the company that actually backs its talking points. Talent doesn't always show up in a tailored suit with a corner office. Sometimes it walks these halls pushing a mop." The motion passed by a narrow margin, more from curiosity than conviction. 3 days later, a woman in a sharp green suit appeared at the rec center, portfolio in hand. She introduced herself as a representative of the Novodyne Foundation. "We'd like to support your Saturday program," she said. "Equipment, transportation, new boards, no conditions, anonymous benefactors." Lena narrowed her eyes. This wouldn't have anything to do with the tall guy who insists on playing white, would it? The woman smiled. That evening, Lena headed back to the executive lounge. Ethan was already there, standing instead of sitting, hands laced behind his back like he was awaiting a verdict. She walked to the board, made her move, and sat. "So you're starting the game this time?" he asked. "Figured I've let you lead long enough," she said. I had nothing to do with that donation, he blurted. Of course you didn't, she said dryly, eyes never leaving the pieces. I didn't want to disrespect your pride, he tried. It's not pride, Ethan. It's proof. Proof that people like me can build something without being someone's feel-good project. He nodded, swallowing whatever defense he'd been preparing. Then let me offer a different kind of trade, he said, fingers resting on a pawn. You train seriously for the tournament, he said. I'll match you, game for game. No coaches, no perks. Just you and me. 5 mornings a week before the city wakes up. She studied him. You trying to level up? I'm trying to keep up, he admitted. Lena slid her bishop forward. Then stop negotiating and start playing, she said, eyes locked on the board as the rhythm resumed. The alarm screamed at 4:45 a.m., slicing through the quiet of Lena's tiny apartment. She smacked it off, then sat up slowly. The place still smelled faintly of last night's lavender tea and industrial cleaner from her uniform. By 5:15, she was walking south side streets in a too-thin windbreaker, battered canvas bag over her shoulder, wooden set and dented thermos rattling inside. Ethan was already in the back booth of a cafe near Roosevelt and Wabash. The place opened early for commuters. No one cared that the CEO of Novodyne drank black coffee from a chipped mug across from a woman in worn work shoes. "You're late," he said without looking up. "I'm always late when you try that smug Scandinavian," she replied. They set up the board without small talk. It became ritual. 5 mornings a week before sunrise gave the city edges, they played and studied, tearing each other's openings apart. Between games, something like friendship seeped in, reluctant but real. Ethan brought heavy theory, old paperbacks by Nimzowitsch and Tal, annotated printouts. Lena countered with muscle memory, from park hustlers and blitz games, instincts sharpened by survival rather than coaching. Somewhere between them, their styles began to fuse. One morning, after she trapped his queen behind his own careless pawn, Ethan leaned back and rubbed his temples. "I swear, you're reading my thoughts," he groaned. "I'm reading your patterns," she said, resetting pieces. "You hate being uncomfortable. That's your biggest weakness." "I grew up uncomfortable," he protested. She shook her head. "I grew up unstable. You grew up insulated. Those aren't the same battlefield, Ethan." Later that day, he walked into the main boardroom to find the head of communications, waiting with a printout. "Have you seen this?" she asked, sliding it over. The headline read, "CEO mentors janitor for major chess tournament. Progressive leadership or PR stunt." Grainy photos showed him, and Lena hunched over a cafe board. "This wasn't cleared through my team," she said tightly. "The story's already spreading online." "Good," Ethan said. "Good," she echoed, stunned. "If they want to talk about leadership that isn't staged, let them," he replied. "If they want to argue about class lines, power structures, second chances, better." She frowned. "This could be weaponized against us." "Let them try," he said, gathering the pages. "At least this story started with something true instead of a campaign brief." Meanwhile, Lena was staring down a different kind of storm. Someone had slipped a folded sheet of paper into her locker at work. No name, no flourish. Just 3 block printed words. "Know your place." She crumpled it slowly. Not out of fear, but anger. The low, simmering kind that waits, collecting interest, until it explodes at the worst possible moment. The next morning at the cafe, she arrived 5 minutes early, eyes ringed and sharper than usual. Her moves came fast, almost violent, pieces landing with tiny thuds. "You're swinging today," Ethan remarked after dropping a rook. "Big night?" "Just tired," she said, jaw clenched. He recognized the lie but didn't push. On the board, her positions held. Off it, something in her balance had shifted. When they packed the set away, he tried again. "You sure you're okay? You've been sharper than usual, even for you." "I'm fine," she repeated, slipping into her jacket like armor. "Mid-shift text from my landlord, that's all." He didn't buy it, but he respected how tightly she guarded her private life. Still, as she walked out, he couldn't shake the feeling of a storm gathering around her. Back at Novodyne that evening, the stairs felt sharper, informed now by headlines and whispers. 2 analysts in the hallway didn't notice her as they passed. "I mean, mentoring a janitor?" One scoffed. "It's cute until someone sues." She kept walking, fingers tightening around the trash bag. The note from her locker pulsed at the edge of her thoughts like a bruise she couldn't stop pressing. Ethan felt the ripple from above. Legal pinged him with risk assessments. PR drafted talking points in case the story turned. He skimmed them, then closed the email without replying. The only fallout he cared about was the one he couldn't quantify. Through a glass wall, he caught sight of Lena pushing her cart faster than usual, shoulders tight. For once, he had no script to fix it. By the time her shift ended, exhaustion clung to Lena's skin like another uniform. The locker note, the hallway whispers, the online photos she hadn't even seen yet, they stacked on her shoulders. She thought about skipping the rec center, claiming illness, but the faces of the kids flashed in her mind, small hands hovering over plastic pieces, waiting for her to show up again. So she went. That evening, she slipped into the rec center. Later than usual, wind-burned and quiet. The kids were already wrapping up their tactics sheets, little brows furrowed in concentration as they packed away boards. Coach Harris spotted her from across the room and frowned, clipboard tucked under one arm. "You're running behind tonight," he said, eyes scanning her face like it held an answer. "You okay?" he asked, voice softening. "I'm fine," Lena said quickly, dropping her bag with more force than she meant to. "You don't look fine," Harris replied. She forced a shrug. "Just a long week." She bent over the nearest board, showing a girl how to finish a basic mate, but her hands shook slightly. The words from that anonymous note still echoed, "Know your place." "I told you, I'm fine," Lena muttered, more to herself than anyone. When one of the older boys hesitated over a rook trade, she snapped, "Move it, we don't have all day." The kid flinched. She'd never raised her voice once in months of coaching. After the session, she sank onto the bleachers, fists pressed against her knees, when Ethan appeared. He'd dropped by again, uninvited, but this time Ethan didn't launch straight into advice or questions. He just stood near the gym wall, watching the flicker of the old lights on the varnished floor. "You skipped on me this morning," he said at last. "I know. I waited an hour. I know. Talk to me, Lena." Her eyes stayed fixed on the ground. She finally looked up, eyes reddened. "You don't get to ask me to open up," she said, "when you can walk into any room and people listen before you even speak." He frowned. "What happened?" "I got a note." "What did it say?" "Doesn't matter." "It does. People hate what they can't control. You're used to being liked. I'm used to disappearing, except now I'm visible for the wrong reasons." Ethan went quiet, the gym echoing with distant bouncing balls from another class. "I don't want to be your storyline," she said, "your comeback narrative, your miracle headline." "You're not," he answered. "Then why does it feel like every time I move toward the light, I'm standing in your shadow?" His features softened. "Then step out of it, Lena. You really think this is about me polishing my image?" Ethan asked. I'm trying to get sharper because of you, not through you. You're not the footnote here, I am. Some of the anger left her shoulders, though the heat in her gaze remained. The tournament's in 3 weeks, she said. I need distance. I need to concentrate. For once, on myself alone. Ethan nodded slowly. Then I'll see you across a board, he said. No more early morning cafe sessions. No more candid pictures for strangers to spin. She grabbed her bag and started for the exit. At the door, she paused. If I win, clap like I'm nobody to you. He smiled. And if you don't? She didn't answer. They both knew. The tournament venue pulsed with quiet nerves, the kind that didn't need noise to feel deafening. A refurbished hotel ballroom downtown, beige walls, buzzing fluorescents, rows of metal chairs and vinyl-topped tables bearing regulation sets and plastic clocks. A banner announced Chicago Open Chess Classic, hosted by the Illinois Chess Association. Near the doors, Lena gripped her badge, simple blouse, pressed slacks, scrubbed sneakers. Around her swirled grandmasters in crisp blazers, teen phenoms glued to prep apps, middle-aged regulars shifting bifocals, and weekend warriors talking openings too loudly. Lena felt simultaneously out of place and exactly where she was meant to be. Across the room, Ethan slipped in wearing a gray hoodie and jeans, just another name on the pairing sheet. He didn't approach, only inclined his head. She mirrored it. Lena's opening opponent was a mid-board club player from Evanston who clearly thought he was slumming it. He flashed her a patronizing smile and tried to chat about how brave she was for entering. She answered with a nod and the Sicilian. 27 moves later, he was staring at a mating net he'd never seen coming while she calmly signed the score sheet and walked away. Her second-round pairing was tougher. A young woman with wired headphones and a Blitz addict's rhythm. The girl hurled pieces forward with reckless aggression, trading everything that moved, trying to drag Lena into chaos. Instead, Lena slowed everything down. She tightened her structure, broke the attack's spine, and nursed a small advantage until the other woman's clock crashed to zero with one last panicked glance. By the close of day 1, she hadn't dropped a single game. Still, the commentary trailed her like cigarette smoke. Near the snack table, she passed 2 spectators. "Isn't that the custodian from that Novodyne article?" one murmured. "She's not really self-made," the other replied. "She's got backing. You know how those stories get curated." Lena kept walking. They weren't erasing her this time. They were revising her. On the far side of the hall, Ethan wrestled with his own brackets. He focused on steady, principled chess, won a couple, dropped one painful loss, split a pair of draws. But rating points weren't why he was there. He wasn't hunting another achievement for his bio. He was trying to understand who he became when he wasn't the most powerful man in the room. After her last game of the day, Lena slipped into the hotel lobby just to breathe air that didn't smell like sweat and concentration. She hadn't expected to see Ethan leaning against a marble column as if he'd been rooted there for hours. "You were sharp in there," he said. "You looked relaxed." "I played like I had something to lose," she answered. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Tournament staff rolled carts of leftover sandwiches past. "Why are you still hanging around?" Lena asked finally. "Why aren't you home, counting profits?" He studied the patterned carpet. "Because I think this might be the first time I've cared who wins besides me," he said. She squinted. "Okay, maybe the second, ever." Lena dropped onto a lobby bench, setting her bag between her sneakers. "I heard them," she said. Let me guess, Ethan replied, sitting beside her. You're a corporate fairy tale. A distraction from Novadine's sins. Something like that. I can't muzzle them, Lena. I don't need you to, she answered. I just need their version of me not to matter. Then play tomorrow like their background noise, he said. Pretend the whole room's on mute. I plan to, she replied, standing. But you said you cared who wins. You'll clap, right? Like you've never met me. He smiled, lines easing at the corners of his eyes. I'll clap loud enough to embarrass myself, stranger or not. All day if I have to. Day 2 swung by like a pendulum wound too tight. Lena's third-round rival was a former college star known for talking trash between moves. He chose the King's Indian and ran his mouth about her posture, her pace, even her hair. She ignored him, tossed a bishop for a central pawn on move 14, and by move 23, he finally saw the noose. Check, she said, sliding her rook with a soft click. That's not check, he snapped. Look closer. A pause, then a curse as he tipped his king. He refused her hand. That night, the semi-final list went up. Ethan scraping in near the bottom, Lena near the top. As she read, someone muttered, "If she wins, it's because someone wanted her to." Lena spun that sentence around in her head back at the hotel. She lay flat on the too-soft mattress, eyes tracing cracks in the ceiling, unable to shut her mind off. Was she really sprinting toward winning, or sprinting away from the memory of being the girl who always cleaned up after everyone else's victories? Sleep never actually came. Not once before dawn. By the next morning, the hall felt louder, harsher. Cameras clustered near the front tables, reporters hovered, and the air buzzed with final round tension. Ethan settled at board 3 opposite a Latvian technician, famous for squeezing blood from endgames. At board 4, Lena faced a man she half recognized. Tall, expensively tailored, hedge fund energy. He smiled without warmth and offered his hand. "Ready, Miss Brooks?" "Always have been," she replied, shaking it. The clock started. Lena didn't play to make a point or feed a headline. She played so she could breathe. She lured him into lines he thought he'd memorized, then twisted them. Early sacrifices, stubborn defenses, perfectly timed breaks. Each move landed like a drumbeat in a song only she heard clearly. 43 moves later, his carefully manicured position finally collapsed. He stared, then tipped his king with a tight jaw. A murmur rolled across the row of boards. Out of the corner of her eye, Lena watched Ethan's own game slip away in a brutal endgame squeeze. Yet when he looked over at her score, his face broke into a huge grin, and he started clapping. He clapped once, then again, louder, refusing to stop until others joined in. Soon, the whole section was applauding. Officials pressed a clear trophy into her hands. Reporters shoved recorders forward. Flashes popped. None of it lodged as deeply as seeing Ethan across the room mouthing, like, "I don't know you." For the first time in years, she felt like the one moving pieces not being moved. The celebration banquet felt too bright, too hot, and packed with people who had only just learned how to pronounce Lena Brooks. She hovered near the edge of the ballroom, fingers looped around a glass of ginger ale she barely sipped. The trophy sat on a side table beside designer cheeses and shrimp towers, while executives tossed around words like inspiring and representative without really grasping either. Ethan drifted at the fringes of a knot of donors and directors, all of them trying to staple his name to her achievement like a logo on a jersey. He nodded when he had to, eyes constantly searching over shoulders and champagne flutes until he spotted her, staring at her own etched name on the plaque as if it might vanish if she blinked. "You holding up?" he asked when he finally reached her. "I've never seen this much lobster and this many pretend smiles in one room," she said. "You won, Lena. You changed the board." "Then why do I feel like a different kind of pawn?" Before he could answer, the state's lieutenant governor swept over, hand extended, campaign grin perfectly rehearsed. "Miss Brooks, your journey has inspired the whole state," he boomed. "We'd love to collaborate on an education tour. Buses, school visits, the works." "You want to wheel me around so I can tell kids I got lucky?" she asked. "I wouldn't say lucky. You're extraordinary." "I've always been extraordinary," she replied quietly. "You just didn't notice until the cameras did." The official's smile flickered. Then he excused himself toward a safer conversation. Ethan stepped closer. "You didn't have to scorch him like that," he murmured. "I didn't," she said. "I just turned the truth up and let it sit there." Her gaze swept the room. "I want out. Can we walk?" He signaled a staffer and followed her toward the service exit. They slipped through a side door and stepped into the night. The air was sharp and cold, real in a way the banquet had never been. They walked 3 blocks without speaking, cutting down to the Riverwalk where leftover festival lights still hung, reflecting in the dark water like scattered pawns. The city noise dropped to a low, distant hum around them. "I'm proud of you," he said finally. "I didn't do it for you," she replied. "I know." They stopped at the railing, looking out over the black water. "I used to walk this path after late cleaning shifts," Lena said. "I'd stay until sunrise, just to prove to myself there was something bigger than fluorescent lights and wet floors." "And now?" Ethan asked. "Now, I'm not sure," she admitted, turning toward him. "Do you ever feel like the moment you win, people think they've got permission to stop really listening again?" He considered that. "You think they're listening now?" "No," she said. "They're watching, not the same thing." "Then make them listen," he said. "Do something they can't tune out." "What, start a channel?" She scoffed. "Post grind-set videos? Write some cheesy memoir? Lena Brooks, From Mops to Mastery?" "I was thinking, less hashtags, more legacy," Ethan said. "I want you to run the Youth Chess Initiative. Full-time position, salary, benefits, staff. Not a side project, a real seat at the table you already earned. And you shape it, not me, not Novodyne." "Is this just another favor, dressed up as opportunity?" she asked. "No," he said. "This is me paying a debt. For every game you crushed that rewired the way I think. For every kid who saw your story and realized disappearing wasn't their only option. I believe you're nowhere near finished, Lena. I just don't want my company to be what dims you." She didn't answer right away, her hands curled on the railing, knuckles pale in the river light. Finally, she exhaled. "All right," she said, "but on one condition. Name it. No staged photo ops, no PR campaigns with my face on the homepage, just the work." He held out his hand. "Deal." She shook it, grip firm, sealing something larger than a contract. "You know I didn't play that last game for glory," she said after a while. "I know," Ethan replied. "I played so some girl like me wouldn't be stuck bussing tables in the back while somebody else took credit for her brilliance." "You didn't just win, Lena," he said. "You changed what winning looked like for everyone watching that room tonight." "Don't start getting all poetic on me," she said, a small smile tugging at her mouth. They walked again, city lights winking on around them. "So, what now?" she asked. "Now you teach," he said. "And you?" "I study." She laughed, surprising herself. "You're still awful in cramped positions, by the way." Then I guess I'll need more lessons. That night, Lena went home without the trophy. Let the foundation keep the glass. What stayed with her was the echo of clapping from people who didn't owe her anything. In her small living room, she set a single pawn on the table where her old board used to sit. Not as a servant, not as a sacrifice, but as a starting square. Outside, the city kept grinding, trains shrieking, sirens flaring, strangers arguing over cabs, utterly indifferent to one woman placing a tiny piece on a cheap table. It didn't need to notice. Lena felt it anyway. Tomorrow, the easy part would be over. The speeches, the headlines, the shock. Tomorrow, the slow, relentless game of building something real would finally begin. For her. The gym smelled of floor walks, old wood, and ghosted laughter. It was barely 8 on Saturday, but folding tables already lined the space in neat rows, each crowned with mismatched boards and scuffed plastic pieces. A beat-up speaker in the corner leaked soft jazz while rectangles of sunlight slid across the floor. At the center of it, clipboard in hand, stood Lena. "All right, troops," she called, voice firm and warm. "Pawns to the middle. We start in 10. A buzz ran through the kids, most under 12, legs swinging off metal chairs. It had been exactly 32 days since she'd taken the Chicago title. The trophy lived in a storage closet at the new nonprofit. Lena didn't need it. The work reminded her who she was. 2 weeks earlier, she'd officially stepped into her new job, director of the Chicago Youth Chess Initiative. A title so long she joked it barely fit on a name tag. It came with a cramped office, a decent paycheck, and a towering stack of expectations. The first 2 meant little to her. The third she carried like something sacred every single day. "Coach Lena," a voice called. She turned to see Kyla, a lanky 10-year-old with neat braids and a habit of marching knights straight backward, waving a worksheet. "I checkmated DeAndre in 4 moves yesterday," Kyla bragged. "You sure he wasn't half asleep?" Lena teased. Kyla giggled. "I used that back rank trap you showed us." Lena grinned. "Then you're officially dangerous." As she turned back to the front, Lena spotted a familiar silhouette by the doorway. Ethan leaned against the wall, hands in his pockets, letting the class unfold without interfering. He'd become a regular presence, though never during instruction. He brought books, extra sets, snacks that mysteriously appeared without logos. Staff now referred to him as the tall donor who always loses to Coach Lena. When the session broke and the kids spilled into the hallway in a blur of sneakers and backpacks, Lena walked over. "Lurking again?" she asked. "I prefer monitoring strategic deployment," he replied. "You just like watching them get better than you." "Guilty." They drifted to the tiny staff kitchen, where he poured her coffee without asking. She took it like they'd done this 100 times. "How's the board treating you?" she asked. "Like I'm running an experiment they don't quite understand but can't stop funding," he said. "They want a public campaign now. Profiles, interviews, the whole Lena arc syndicated." Her smile thinned. "And what do you want?" "If you'd rather spend your life building kids than brands," he said, "do that. You're not a mascot, Lena. You're the engine." "I'm exhausted from being a symbol," she admitted. "From being who they point at when they need proof the system works." "You're not their symbol," Ethan said. "You're the thing dragging them forward." "That's a pretty metaphor," she said. "I'm full of them. Should have been a poet. Or a rook," she added. "Straight lines, zero nuance." "Ouch," he muttered, feigning injury. "Seriously, though," he said, setting his mug down. "Look at what you've built. A structure, a pipeline, a sense of possibility that didn't exist before. and you manage not to make it about you. The second this becomes about me, it stops feeling honest, she replied. Then let's keep it honest, he said. Keep it small, sharp, and real for everyone here. She checked the clock. I've got a parent meeting in 10, she said. I'll get out of your way, but there's one more thing, Ethan replied. There's a citywide youth invitational next month. Big sponsors, big spotlight. They asked me to recommend a coach for the Chicago squad. I put your name down. Without asking? You'd have said no. Now you get the chance to say yes, he added with a shrug. She sighed but didn't argue. As he turned for the door, Lena called after him. Why are you still coming around, Ethan? He paused. Because this, he said, gesturing toward the gym, is the best thing I've ever been lucky enough to stand next to with you in it. She watched the door swing shut behind him, then walked back to the main room. On the demo board, she'd left a lone pawn in the middle of the file. She picked it up, feeling its cheap plastic edges, and carefully set it on the 8th rank. End of the board. Beginning of everything else. For her and for them. The auditorium hosting the City Invitational was older than most of the kids seated in it. Ceiling tiles sagged at the corners, stage lights flickered, and the curtains smelled faintly of dust. But that afternoon, every folding chair was filled, with families, coaches, volunteers, city officials, and the air vibrated with pride, nerves, and the strange electricity of finally being seen. From the wing, Lena adjusted the collar of her navy blazer. It still felt ODD, wearing something that didn't reek of disinfectant or tug like a supply strap. Her shoes were polished instead of just clean. Her badge no longer read facilities. It read Coach in bold letters, and beneath that, Director, Chicago Youth Chess Initiative. The words still surprised her. The final round had just wrapped. Her Southside squad buzzed in the front rows, medals clinking, comparing blunders and brilliancies in the same breath. They hadn't taken the entire event, but Kyla had clawed her way into the top 5. For Lena, that was enough to feel the ground under them shift a little, for good, she hoped. The MC tapped the mic. Before we close, we want to recognize someone without whom today doesn't happen, he said. Lena's stomach clenched. Please welcome to the stage the woman behind the boards, Coach Lena Brooks. The applause that rose wasn't polite. It was loud, messy, real. In the back row, standing and clapping steadily, was Ethan, like he had all along. The microphone was a little too tall. She lowered it, hands miraculously steady. I didn't come here to be a spotlight, she began. I came because I thought if I could help even one kid believe they were more than what their zip code or report card said, that'd be enough. Turns out I was thinking too small, way too small. You didn't just want to believe, she told the crowd. You wanted to build, and you have. There was a time when the only thing people noticed about me was the cart I pushed. Not my name, not my mind. The thing I love about chess is that even the smallest piece can flip the whole board if it's brave enough to cross it. The silence after that line lasted half a heartbeat before the room erupted. Cheers, whistles, stamping feet. Real noise. Later, slipping behind the curtain to breathe, Lena found Ethan waiting on the steps with 2 paper cups. Figured you wouldn't want champagne, he said. You figured right, she answered, accepting the coffee like it was something stronger for her nerves tonight. They sat on the back stairwell, the muffled buzz of the auditorium on the other side of the wall. You pulled it off, he said. We pulled it off, she corrected. No, Lena, you did, she smirked. You're terrible at letting people deflect credit. I'm working on it, he grinned, Recovery's a process, even for overachievers like me, apparently. "So, what's next?" he asked. "More kids, more boards, more mornings, where someone thinks they can't win, and then they do," she said. "And you?" "I'll keep showing up, keep listening, keep moving." He nodded. "I brought you something, by the way. If it's another plaque with my face on it, I'm tossing it in the river. No hesitation." He laughed and pulled a slim box from his jacket pocket. "Relax," he said, handing it over. She opened it to find a single carved queen, dark walnut, polished smooth. At its base, tiny letters were etched. "Every move you made mattered." Lena stared at it for a long time. "I'm not used to keepsakes," she said quietly, "or to being kept." "You should get used to them," Ethan replied. "You're someone worth remembering." She closed the box gently, the click of the lid soft but final. "Thank you," she said, the words heavier than they sounded. They stood together in the cramped space, neither rushing to rejoin the crowd, letting the quiet settle around them like a held breath for once. "Do you ever regret it?" he asked. "What, sitting down to that board in the lounge?" she said. "No. I regret all the days before it, when I convinced myself I didn't deserve to sit anywhere but in the shadows. After that night, I stopped pretending I didn't want more. More room, more risk, more chances to move first instead of cleaning up." Outside, the sun was sliding down behind brick rooftops. The city kept doing what it always did. Honking, hustling, forgetting, and yet something felt altered. Not in the skyline or the headlines, but in the kids who just watched a woman who looked like them own a stage. And in one woman who'd finally stopped walking with her head down for good. Later that night, alone in her apartment, Lena set the carved queen beside the little pawn on her table. Two pieces side by side, one that had started at the back, one that began at the front. One beginning, one becoming. She looked at them and finally let herself feel something close to peace. Not finished, but no longer lost. Days later, the invitations and interview requests kept piling up in her inbox. Talk shows, podcasts, glossy magazines wanting the Cinderella janitor story. Lena ignored most of them, answering only the ones that meant more boards, more funding, more kids. Every choice, every no and every yes felt like another quiet move on a board only she could really see. Sometimes, on the train home, she'd catch her reflection in the dark window and think about that first night in the executive lounge. If Ethan hadn't made that joke, if she'd kept her head down, if she'd walked past the board, I'd regret that forever, she thought. Not the risks I took after, only the years I believed I didn't deserve them. Chicago rolled on around her, elevators chiming, offices filling, trains rattling overhead, mostly oblivious to the woman with a queen and pawn on a wobbly table in a small apartment. It didn't matter. What mattered was in the kids who now knew they belonged at the board, and in Lena, who finally walked her own streets without lowering her gaze. Ever again! Being seen is a human need, not a luxury. If you're over 65, you probably know exactly how it feels to walk into a room and have people look straight past you. The world rushes around you. Faster phones, newer buildings, younger faces. And yet you, with decades of life behind you, can feel oddly invisible. That's the H at the heart of Lena's story. For years, she pushed a cleaning cart down shiny corporate hallways while executives in expensive suits talked about innovation and disruption. They knew the name of the caterer and the brand of their bottled water, but not the woman scrubbing their floors. Many older Americans have lived that same quiet disrespect. The factory worker whose hands built half the town, the grandmother who raised 3 generations, the veteran stocking shelves at the grocery store. What Lena reminds us is simple and painful. A title doesn't measure a person's worth. A uniform doesn't define a mind. The night she sat down across from Ethan, she didn't ask permission to matter. She just took her place at the board, and in doing so she forced a whole room of people to see what they had been ignoring for years. For those of us in our later seasons, there is a lesson there. Even if people overlook you, your story, your wisdom, and your gifts are still very much alive. You are more than the role others assign you. It's never too late to pick up the pieces you put away. Many older viewers remember a moment when life took a sharp turn. An illness, a layoff, a family crisis, and some early dream had to be packed in a box and shoved into the back of the closet. Lena once dreamed on a cardboard chessboard in a crowded apartment on the South Side. Then her father fell. Her mother got sick, and she did what so many of you have done. She chose responsibility over ambition. Years later, wiping down a conference table, she could easily have stayed in her lane when Ethan mocked her. Instead, she did something small but courageous. She sat down. At 33, long past the age when prodigies are crowned, she opened herself to the possibility that the pieces of her old dream might still fit together. And right across from her, Ethan began his own late-in-life lesson. A man who had always been the strongest player in the room suddenly discovered that money and titles mean very little when your king is trapped and your pride is on the line. He chose to be a student again, to walk into a dingy cafe at dawn and let a night shift cleaner take his game apart and put it back together. If you're listening in your 70s and 80s, that may be the most hopeful part of this story. You can pick up a hobby you abandoned, mend a relationship you avoided, or, finally, speak your truth. You can still sit down at a new board even now. The dream may not look exactly the way it did at 25, but it is not gone. It's waiting where you left it. Real victory is measured in the lives you lived. By the end of Lena's journey, the trophy is almost an afterthought. Yes, she wins the tournament. Yes, cameras flash and politicians rush to stand beside her. But watch what she does with that victory. She doesn't retire into comfort or chase fame. She goes back to a worn-out gym that smells of floor wax and echoes with the laughter of children. She turns her gift into a bridge for kids who might otherwise drift into trouble or disappear into low-wage jobs with no one ever asking what they're capable of. That is a lesson older Americans know in their bones. Many of you spent your best years making sure someone else could stand a little taller. Kids, grandkids, neighbors, church members. You cooked extra meals, watched babies so their parents could work, slipped $20 bills into worried hands. Lena's choice reminds us that success without service is hollow. Ethan learns it too. Instead of using her story as a shiny public relations slogan, he quietly funds boards, buses, snacks, and space so those kids can play. He moves from being the man at the top of the building to the man hauling boxes of chess sets into a drafty gym. In the long run, the real victory isn't etched on glass. It's written in the confidence of a 10-year-old girl who suddenly believes she belongs anywhere her mind can reach. For those of us closer to the final chapters of our lives, this is where the heart of the story lies. We may not control how the world talks about us, but we can decide who we lift, who we mentor, and what kind of courage we place in the hands of the next generation. That, more than any title or headline, is the legacy that endures. The board is still in front of you. For those in their mid-60s, 70s, and beyond, it's easy to think the big moves are behind you. Our culture loves fresh faces and fast stories, and often treats older folks like background furniture. But Lena's path from unnoticed cleaner to trusted coach says something else. The first move that changed her life was not winning a tournament. It was daring to believe she belonged at the table. Many of you have spent decades cleaning up other people's messes, at work, at home, in families and communities that leaned on your strength. You may never sit across from a CEO or hold a trophy under bright lights, but you still have a board in front of you every day. The people you influence, the wisdom you pass on, the quiet courage you show by refusing to shrink. In chess, even a pawn that starts at the edge can cross the whole board and become something new. Age doesn't change that rule. Wherever you are tonight, in a small apartment, a retirement community, or a house that feels quiet, you have moves left. You still matter. And someone, somewhere, is waiting for you to believe that again. Friends, after walking with Lena from the janitor's closet to the tournament hall and into that noisy gym full of kids, I'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had a gift, dream, or skill that you packed away because life got hard? And do you feel a tug to pick it up again now? What board is still in front of you, even in this season of life? Share your story in the comments, tap like if this spoke to you, and please subscribe to my YouTube channel so you don't miss the next chapter of encouragement and hope.